Mr. Speaker.
Materia Toure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud of the Green Party and my colleagues who have led the opposition to this legislation. If Mr Smith is referring to the gambling legislation that was eventually passed in 2003, the Green Party voted against that legislation, Mr Smith. You should check your facts. And I would note that the whole debate from National Party, the sale of this deal to New Zealanders, has been littered with falsehoods and lies. Littered with falsehoods and lies. And we can start from the very beginning, from the very start of the process, when John Key and Stephen Joyce and their officials went out seeking tenders for building the convention centre in Auckland. They received 5
Point
tenders.
of order. Honourable Nick Smith.
The member asserted that the ministers responsible for this bill, including my colleague Stephen Joyce, and specifically used the word lies. And that is not a parliamentary phrase.
I understand the point of order, and I was listening very carefully. What the member said was the process was littered with untruths and lies and was not attributed to an individual. Now, I know it's a fine line, but this House has been quite clear that all members are honourable members, but I would caution the member that you will bring disorder if you skirt around the areas that the member is doing it. I'm not ruling against her on this occasion, but I caution her to be very careful with her words.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. So it started from the very beginning when the tenders went out, and five tenders, I understand, were returned to the officials. Of the 5 tenders, the Sky City tender was the 5th. It was the one that failed most of the criteria that the officials had put out. And yet it was Sky City and their tender that went to John Key. And John Key wrote, check with Sky City first, and he got his officials to go off and talk with Sky City, to have meetings with Sky City, to talk to them about their tender, to talk to them about what they could do to improve. The government changed the criteria to make it even easier for Sky City to meet the threshold test. Because from the very beginning, John Key and Stephen Joyce wanted to deliver to Sky City the new casino that Sky City wanted. For 10 years, Sky City has been fighting to get a new casino, and they finally found the mechanism to do it by offering to build John Key his monument, the convention centre, in exchange for the concessions that would deliver to Sky City the 3rd largest casino in the country. So right from the very beginning, there was mistruths and secret deals being done by this government through its process. And the only reason that became public, after nearly a year, I think, of the negotiations, was because the Green Party put in a complaint to the Auditor-General and asked her to investigate. It took them 6 months to work through the papers, even to decide whether or not to investigate. And after 6 months of investigation, initial investigation, the Auditor-General did look at this deal and did come back with a finding that it was neither even-handed nor transparent. Neither even-handed nor transparent. And John Key broke the confidentiality arrangements with the Auditor-General and went out around Christmas time of that year saying, she's not going to find me guilty of anything. She's going to say it was all fine. I'm vindicated, he said. What happens when 2 months later the report comes out? Neither even-handed nor transparent. There were problems with the process because the process was dirty from the start. And it was National and their officials and the ministers who were wanting to keep all of that secret, but we got that exposed through the Auditor-General process, and rightly so. So what are some of the untruths and the misleadings that have come out as a result of John Key having now got the deal signed with Sky City, spent all this money getting them ready so that their tender would be accepted, accepting their tender to build this convention centre in exchange for the 3rd largest casino. He then has to sell it to the country. And so what does he do to sell it to the country? All sorts of dodgy stuff going on to sell it to the country. Well, let's start with the jobs, shall we? So we end up with a report that the government relies on, says so in their regulatory impact statement, that there will be 800 jobs after the casino is built and 1,000 jobs in construction. Not a single piece of evidence. There is no document that the government has, or at least they've released, that shows those numbers. Not a single one. Why? Because actually that information comes from Sky City. Because the government is relying on Sky City's numbers to justify this deal and to try to sell this to the country. So what does the evidence say? What do the independent financial reports say? There might be around 350 jobs in construction. There might be around somewhere 300 jobs maybe in the operation, certainly not the 800 and the 1,000 that Stephen Joyce and John Key and now Bill English talk about. But you know what the independent financial analysis of this deal shows? It shows that there will be a net increase to the country in jobs of just 18. Just 18. And the government has refused. They refer to this report, actually, but they refuse to acknowledge the numbers of the only independent financial assessment of the results of this deal, because they want to sell this deal to the country so badly they're prepared to inflate the numbers from just a few hundred to thousands and thousands across the country. It's simply not true. Who in the government disagrees? Because the government is saying, of course, that this is all fine and perfectly rational and that they have lots of evidence to show that this is a good deal, that the harm minimisation measures that they are putting in place will be effective in reducing the harm that will be caused by the increased gambling. Actually, that's not the truth either. That is just another set of spin. Government is not telling the truth when they say that these harm minimisation measures will work. And who do we turn to for that evidence? We turn to the Ministry of Health. We turn to the Department of Internal Affairs, those agencies who are responsible for assessing whether or not these measures will work. What does the Ministry of Health say? No, it's effectively useless, is what they say. They say the voluntary pre-commitment is effectively useless. They say the harm minimisation measures that the government is trying to sell to the country will not reduce harm. And what else do they say? They say that 8,000 New Zealanders will be affected, badly affected by this deal. And on top of those 8,000 New Zealanders, another 6,500 children will be badly affected by this deal. That is the evidence that the government has, but they won't talk about this to the public. They won't ask for the cost of that social harm, so they can say they don't know what it will cost. They won't ask for more detailed evidence about the impact of gambling harm on families, so that they can pretend that if they don't have the information, it doesn't count, it doesn't matter. Another major spin, another mistruth perpetrated by this government in order to sell this deal to the country. And then I think the last and the worst, Mr. Speaker, the last and the worst of the mistruths that this government spins is that it comes at no cost. Government says to New Zealand, this deal doesn't cost you anything, taxpayers. You're all fine. You don't pay a cent and you get this wonderful convention centre. That is a lie. It is a lie, Mr. Speaker. It is a lie because the cost is borne by taxpayers. I'll tell you who bears that cost. Not just the 8,000 individuals who will be badly affected, or the 6,500 children, but the hundreds of New Zealand businesses who we know will suffer from serious fraud and theft as a result of gambling addiction caused by the increase in gambling opportunities from this bill. From the community organisations, from the play centres, from the marae, from the community groups who work so hard to support New Zealanders across this country, they will be the ones who pay when we know that more than 50% of the crime that these groups, these charities suffer is to feed gambling addiction and gambling harm. We know that the fraud that businesses will suffer will be what pays for this deal. So when government says it is no cost to New Zealanders, they are telling New Zealanders a lie. The Green Party has been very clear from the start that we are opposed to this deal. It is morally contemptible. It is a dirty, dodgy deal. It should never have occurred in this way. And we make this commitment to New Zealanders. We welcome Labour's commitment to opposing this. We make this commitment to New Zealanders. We will continue the fight because this convention centre hasn't been built yet. The agreement that Sky City has with the government has not yet been fulfilled. They still need to do a great deal more before a single sod is turned or a single new pokie machine is put into that building. We will fight this deal all the way, and we welcome every New Zealander who will join us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Kia ora.
Dr. John Yang.
Out of the 11,290